My ABC Book by Jose. Alligator begins with A. Alligator. Apple begins with A. Alligator. Ant begins with A. Ant. Bike begins with B. Bike. Ball begins with B. Ball. Bear begins with B. Bear. Banana begins with B. Banana. Carrot begins with C. Carrot. Dolphin begins with D. Dolphin. Elephant begins with E. Elephant. Exercise begins with E. Exercise. Egg begins with E. Egg. Five begins with F. Five. Grass begins with C. Grass. Horse begins with H. Horse. Hat begins with H. Hat. Heart begins with H. Heart. Insect begins with I. Insect. Igloo begins with I. Igloo. Iguana begins with I. Jelly beans begins with say. Jelly beans. Insect begins with I. Insect. Igloo begins with I. Igloo. Iguana begins with I. Kangaroo begins with K. Kangaroo. Key begins with K. Key. Kite begins with K. Kite. Kettle begins with K. Kettle. Leopard begins with L. Leopard. Macaroni begins with M. Macaroni. Net begins with N. Nose begins with N. Nose begins with N. Octopus begins with O. Octopus. R begins with O. R. Pancake begins with B. Pancake. Net begins with N. Nose begins with N. Nose begins with N. Octopus begins with O. Octopus. R begins with O. R. Question begins with Q. Question. Rainbow begins with R. Rainbow. Rain begins with R. Rain. Robot begins with R. Robot. Rabbit begins with R. Rabbit. Snowman begins with snowman. Turtle begins with C. The turtle. Caesar begins with D. The Caesar. Zebra begins with D. The zebra. Tiger begins with D. The tiger. Umbrella begins with U. Unicorn begins with U. Brand begins with V. Brand. Watermelon begins with W. Watermelon. Wheel begins with W. Wheel. Wheel begins with W. Wheel. Water bottle begins with W. Bottle. X-ray begins with X. X-ray. What is? Yacht begins with Y. Yacht. Zero begins with Zero. Zipper begins with Z. Zipper. Zoo begins with Z. Zoom.